So, Brad, are you ready for Hurricane 2023?
Hurricane. I am absolutely gobsmacked that there is even such a thing.
Hurricane 2023. Catch the excitement. So, Los Angeles, since the first time since 1934, had a hurricane bearing down on it. It didn't end up being a hurricane. It was just it got demoted down to a tropical storm. But you know, not enough. In tropical storms, it can cause a lot of damage.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm on the phone with my dad during the tropical storm, and I'm checking in on him because he's a couple hundred miles away from it. I'm like, hey, how's it going down there? By the way, the storm was the width of Mexico, so I was feeling these same effects as my father, who was a couple hundred miles away. Anyway, I'm on the phone with him, and literally at the same time, we both go, oh, holy hell, an earthquake. And while the tropical storm is hitting us, California had an earthquake.
Oh,
and then,
God.
Brad, 2 hours later on my phone, you know how the public alert systems come out? It's like, tornado watch. Eastern Los Angeles is on tornado. And I'm like, a tornado? What the hell?
I didn't hear about the tornado watch. That's bizarre.
No tornado, I guess, touched down. But apparently there were the right conditions for a tornado on the eastern side of the LA mountains and the Rockies a little bit. So the desert communities of LA.
Good Lord.
But holy hell, Brad, a tropical storm, an earthquake, and then a warning for a tornado. It's literally like, you know that meme of FU in particular?
Yeah.
That's what it felt like to Los Angeles. It's like, FU in particular, we're getting everything at once.
You really felt the wrath at that point. It's like, you're ready to just shuck it all in and move to Philadelphia at that point.
Well, at that point, you're moving all your green groceries and corn and tomatoes outside for when the locusts come, because you're like, well, it's happening. It's happening. Might as well give it to them. Might as well let them have our green groceries.
What's the use hiding stuff from locusts after all?
And on that note, everybody, I'm going to say hello and welcome to ComicLab, the show about three trifectas of storms coming at you and making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics for the 300th time.
The 300th show. For everyone listening to this show, you are listening to the 300th Comic Lab.
Wow.
Not one, not two, 300 Comic Labs, which also, by the way, Brad, means that there are 600 episodes overall, because every week we record ProTips as well.
Yeah.
This is a bonkers number of shows for us. I'm quite amazed and a little flustered that we got to 300, frankly.
Yeah. It's really kind of it's kind of a testament to the fact that I think we really enjoy each other's company in a genuine way, because not very many people have stuck around. Between you and Carolyn, no one has stuck around for this much Brad. Usually people get disgusted a long time ago and walk away, and they're like, that's enough of that.
Yeah, the kids don't have a choice. They're still in the house because they have to be there. But yeah, you're right. It's just her and I that's sticking around. Yeah,
that's right.
I will say this genuinely. I look forward to this both as a laughing high point of my week, but also a topic that I love to go deep on in terms of the making of comics, the business around comics. The history of comics, the future of comics. I could talk about this all day long, and talking about it with you has been a unique joy of my life.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and I feel the same way. I really enjoy hearing your take on these things and talking about this subject at a level that very few people, frankly, can talk about, right? There's very few people that have really been in comics to this degree, to which I feel comfortable talking about the minutia of comics with, and it's great to be able to really delve into this subject the way I like to.
You know what? Something we've never talked about, but this thought just occurred to me. Is that all the cartoonists that we grew up wanting to be? Can you imagine Larson and Breathed doing a podcast together in the 80s or 90s? Not that podcasts existed, but you know what I mean.
Right, like a radio show.
Yeah, or Schultz and Walker having a radio show about comics in the 60s or 70s.
It would have been amazing.
It's a different world, though, isn't it, for comics now, that this is even a thing where we can talk about comics on the regular. It's a unique moment for cartoonists and comics.
Yeah, and how nice that we have this chance, not only between you and I, but which is definitely something that has kept me coming back time after time. But now take all of that, and even if Watterson and Larson had a radio show, they wouldn't have had the thing that you and I have, which is the ComicLab community that is built up around this thing. Between our Patreon backers, the Discord server, all of these people now that we talk about on a greater scale and hear from them and hear things that we would have never thought of or perspectives that we wouldn't have been exposed to, all these new ideas, all these new approaches. All these people who have that similar passion to ours that we would have never really gotten a chance to get this much in the weeds with if it wasn't for this community that has come up around ComicLab. Those two things together have made this, and by the way, wait till you hear this, an epic 6-year journey. We are closing out our 6th year. We'll be starting year 7 in January. Has made this an amazing 6-year journey that we've all taken together.
Well, and coming up on 6 years, I actually feel like we've been hitting our stride with this show in the last, 2 years, 18 months, 24 months, something like that. And it actually speaks to the fact that cartooning itself, when you start a title or start a project or start a career, it kind of takes 5, 6, 7 years to get anything moving, get any traction going.
It really does.
Do you think, Brad, we will be here 300 shows from now?
Oh, yeah, unless one of us loses the ability to speak, I think we will. I mean, what else would you be doing on a Tuesday morning, Dave, other than talking to me? You got something better to do?
I mean, that would be the year 2029, Brad. Would we?
Holy
oh my God,
cats.
could we close out the 2020s?
Yes, I think that should be a goal to close out the 2020s. Are you kidding? I'm a completist.
I'll be honest. I hope this comes across with all the warmth I intend. I would love to keep doing this show into my 70s with you. This would be so fun to keep talking comics. But okay, so here's the thing that I wanted to talk to you today. In sort of a bigger scope for the 300th show.
Right.
So imagine, Brad, you have all the skills and the knowledge and everything that is Brad as a cartoonist right now. Your awareness of history, your projection of the future, your capabilities, your business savvy, your ability with the fine muscles of your right hand. You're very good at drawing. All of that, you keep it all. But your career is gone overnight. Like I snap my fingers and your career is gone. You have no website. You have no social media presence. You have no books. You have no history. You have no Eisner nominations. You have no Rubin nominations. You are back to stage
Ringo,
one.
You skipped the Ringo. You skipped the Ringo. I mean, if this is an accurate question, if this is going to be an accurate question.
Oh my God, the smallness of that. Here I am. I'm actively trying to include your awards into this setup. And you're like, no. You got to mention that I can bench press 200 pounds. You didn't mention that.
That's right.
You didn't mention the 200 pounds. So your ability to just polish off a Marie Callender's pie within the night. Let's include all your skill sets.
All of my skills. Yes.
Exactly. Your ability to just single-handedly tackle a Ben and Jerry's pint is great. Yeah.
And most importantly, I have no audience. I have no readers, right? Because I have no comic.
So in this scenario, you have everything, all your mental capabilities, your physical capabilities of drawing are still with you. But I have snapped my fingers. You've lost your audience. You've lost your book. You lost your website. You lost your social media. So tomorrow morning, I mean, probably after a day of mourning.
Yes.
The next day.
And a night of drinking.
And I mean, speaking of Hurricane, you're like, what the hell did I do? Yes. So you've spent the night like, okay, I got to start over again.
Right.
How do you spend the next weeks, the next months, the next years starting over again as Brad Geiger with no audience, no books, no existing archives, no website, and no social media?
Yeah. Okay. So first thing I got to do is go out and get a day job, because this is going to be a long process and I'm going to need to pay bills in the meantime. And this is something that actually, it's speaking about 300 shows, this is something very early in 2018 I started banging the drum on in terms of what's the word I'm looking for? People used to be ashamed of having a day job, right? It was always destigmatizing. That's the word. Yep. Yeah, destigmatizing the day job, because if you wanted to insult an artist, you always said, "Don't quit your day job." So the first thing I want to do is to be very honest. Is that the first thing I need to do is figure out how to pay my bills, and that's going to mean having a day job, because this next part that we're going to go into is going to take a long time. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be a quick fix. This thing that we do took us the first time the better part of 20 years was building it, right? We've only gotten to a point of financial stability in the past several years. It took 10, 12 years for me before things really started gelling. Yeah. So this is going to be a long process, and let's be realistic about it. So first thing I do, I get a day job, because this is going to be a long process.
Can I pause you for a second and add to that? Yeah. So I agree with you on that. Were this situation to happen to me, I would also get a day job. And what I would do very specifically is I would probably, if they would have me back, go back to Mattel Toys.
Oh, interesting.
And I want to speak about this for a minute, because if you have a choice of careers that can give you a stable salary, healthcare, a 401k, whatever it is, while you're trying to build up your cartooning career, in my mind, how much better to have a career that's keeping you up to date on creative software, that's giving you access to materials and training that encourage creativity. And frankly, that is around stimulating creative people. And for me, that was Mattel Toys. We laughed a lot at Mattel. We had some off the wall speakers coming in all the time to sort of stimulate creativity. Yeah. The overall brainstorming sessions were fun. The software was always up to date because it was a Fortune 500 company. So you always had the latest Adobe. You were learning techniques like 3D printing or 3D cutting of metals and plastics. And I got to work for and design for material science that I wouldn't normally have access to, i.e. plastics, metals, woods, rarely wood. But anyway, what I'm getting at is for me, yes, on day job, 100% agree with Brad on that. That would be the first thing I would do if I started from square one again. But I would also, if I could, and not every part of the world would allow for this, I would try to work it in to have a creative job, which I think is what Brad had at the newspaper. You had access to world-class software. Oh, yeah. Every day was a new creative challenge. You were on tight deadlines. Like that job gave you stability, but it also gave you, continued to give you creative pushes.
Yeah, there's nothing like a daily deadline to get really good at something very quickly, right? I learned software very quickly. I learned techniques very quickly. I learned a lot of stuff quick because you were doing it every day. It was a daily deadline, a new project. Here's another project, and you're juggling multiple projects. I got a lot of skills working at a newspaper that I've used throughout. So I'll co-sign that. And
every once in a while, Brad, we get an email or a message in from a Patreon backer who's like, "Hey, I'm a storyboard artist, or I work in animation," and I know that is an exhausting gig, and you come home too tired sometimes to feel like wanting to draw. But here's the thing about a gig like that: you're getting in your 10,000 hours while getting paid. So you're getting better. You're training your hand, your eye, your ability to communicate through a pen quickly by having a job like that. So that you're on the right path, even though it's exhausting, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Now, number two, my next step, and let's see if you agree with this. The next thing that I've got to do is, other than, I guess technically the next thing I got to do is decide what comic I'm going to start working on, what that creative
because I guess you could start carte blanche, right? Yeah.
Right. So what's my creative output going to be? What's that going to look like? Here's a chance that, to start fresh and do something. And so, for me, I am not gonna. I'm gonna go because I think my strength has been much more towards long form than short form, like single panel or comic strip.
Right.
I'm not gonna do a story driven comic strip because I know that is gonna be a really difficult thing to make to put over and make move on today's social media, but. Today's social media isn't going to be today's social media for much longer. But however, if I'm right now, no single panel, that's not where my strength is. No story-driven strip because that's very difficult to get some speed under. So I'm going to do a story. I'm going to probably. However, instead of doing a long sweeping epic, I'm going to focus more on doing short stories, things that I can basically maybe take, I can get from the beginning to end in maybe a year or 2 years, and then maybe start a completely different story, or maybe take that world and take it from another viewpoint or perspective. But I'm going to keep things a little bit more manageable. You know, Evil Inc. started in, I did the relaunch in 2016. And as I'm putting the subsequent books together, I'm seeing these storylines that just sweep for years and years and years. And it's like, it's got to be hard as a reader to stay on top of all that continuity. So I'm going to keep with long form storytelling and long form humor, but I'm going to make it a little bit more manageable, a little bit more bite-sized. Also, that's going to be a way for me to maybe do a story about superheroes in 2025, and then space pirates in 2026, and then undersea adventurers in 2027, right? So I'm going to, and then see what's hitting, see what I like the best. But I'm going to keep things a little bit manageable. I'm not going to make that mistake of trying to do one thing for several years. I'm going to give myself that latitude to move around a little bit. What do you think?
I mean, I think you have the right idea. I'm sort of curious, given the sort of sweeping scope, like you said, of some of the arcs and storylines and character arcs in Evil Inc. What do you mean specifically when you say you would do a shorter 1 year, maybe 2 year arc? I guess you're saying beginning, middle, end, package it as a book, beginning, middle, end, package it as a book. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yep. And even if those two books are in the same universe, they're different storylines that have a very definite beginning and end, right? The Captain Heroic falls in love with Miss Match, and by the end of the year, they're in a relationship. Boom. Right? Because instead of all this will they, won't they, maybe they kiss, maybe they don't, keep it a little bit more compartmentalized. And then maybe next year is Evil Inc. 2, but it's Lightning Lady, focused on Lightning Lady and a whole different aspect of their life, right? And maybe year 3, we're out in space and it's a whole different set of characters. But it's given myself that ability because I don't know what I'm going to be good at. I don't know what my readers are going to respond to. I don't want to get caught into this whole big epic that I'm midway through before I realize that this ain't going anywhere. So I'm going to keep things short and manageable as I'm refinding my footing.
Okay, well, I'll jump in now with Drive, which is my long form story. And can I be honest? This didn't hit me until about 2 minutes ago. I started thinking about having to restart Drive, and it got me really sad because I'm, as of this week, actually, I'm at the 14-year mark with Drive.
Yeah.
And it's really hitting a wonderful spot story-wise.
Yeah.
And God, it would make me sad to have, I mean, I would do it, but it would make me sad to have to start over again.
Yes.
And as much as I would love to redraw the first 20 pages, it would make me sad to start over again. But anyway, with that being in mind, I don't know that I would change anything with Drive, but boy, howdy, I will say this, much like what Brad was saying, it's going to take me 4, 5 years, maybe 6 years until Drive has a head of steam behind it as an income bearing, maybe even 7 or 8 years income bearing comic. Because for a long form story, God, does it take a while to get those train wheels moving. It's great once it's going. Like right now, Drive is a much bigger earner than Sheldon, but boy, howdy, is it harder to, I think, to get that going from a monetization and sales perspective. So although within 4 years, I could have the first big hardcover done. So I'd be making income within 4 years on Drive. I'd probably start the Patreon around the end of the second year, maybe the third year, but it wouldn't be doing much. You know, I would know that it wouldn't. So I'd keep that day job. I'd be working on Drive on nights and weekends. And I know that it would take me 4, maybe 5 years to get that first hardcover out. Because remember, even if the book was ready to go in terms of content, if I'm working a day job and I don't have an assistant anymore, it's probably going to take me the better part of 5 years to get that book out, just because I'm doing it nights and weekends. So basically, my knowledge now would tell me, like, patience. It's going to take a while. And that's probably partially why I would be sad that first night, you know?
Yeah. Now, what about Sheldon? If you are you restarting Sheldon? If so, are you restarting it the same way? Are you going a different direction? Where do you land on that?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because I continue to love Sheldon as an output for, if we're describing it some way, a joke of the day, right? It's a one-off joke of the day. And so I'm not sure that I would relaunch Sheldon the same way. And I'll tell you why. When I was first developing Sheldon in 1997, 1998, I still wanted that to be a newspaper comic strip, which, remember, that would have been a comic strip that you checked in on 7 days a week. You had it in front of you, whether you liked it or not, at your breakfast table. Yeah. So you could build a cast because they're going to be seen every day, right? Yeah. Hell or high water, they're in front of your breakfast table. I don't know, Brad, that I would replicate the cast approach with Sheldon doing it now. I might do what a lot of comics like Sarah Scribbles or Shen Comics or any of these comics that have done well online now is, which is focus on one main character and then occasionally, have a walk-on or an add-on of another person. I might make it just about my character, Arthur the Duck, who's very malleable, very fun to write for, very memorable in the sense of you don't really see ducks in comic strips versus seeing a kid in a comic strip, So, what would be your thoughts on that? Am I making the wrong choice there, or?
No, I wrinkled up my nose when you said you don't see ducks in comic strips much, because I immediately thought of like Donald Duck and Daffy Duck.
Oh yeah, shit. Well, those are animated though, but
true. So I'll grant you that one. I would even tell you on the sidelines, looking in, I would even say. Not even necessary. I think Arthur the Duck could pop up from time to time, but I would even go one step further and not have any real reoccurring characters. Because, for example, unless you count the Pug as a reoccurring character, right? Because you're going to do a lot of those comics.
Oh my God, I forgot about the Pug. But if I wanted to make money quickly, geez Louise, just doing a pet comic. A pet comic in the first 3 years, I could have a book ready to go.
That's a license to print money. You can. It might be a good idea to do that. But also, there was a lot of what was his name? Turok, the Vulcan party planner,
or Torvak.
Torvak,
my
right?
character.
A lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of your pop culture stuff. A lot of the stuff where you just talk about a word for a while or a phrase, you're really strong at that. So if I were consulting from the outside in, I would say not even to lock into any kind of recurring character. I'd say just do the gag, do the joke, and let the chips fall where they may, and then collect them at the end of the year, and call that a thing. And then you could still do what you did with Sheldon and say, okay, all the dog strips, that's going into a book. All the pop culture strips, that's going into a book, and expand your monetization that way.
I see. I completely take your point, but I don't know why I keep going back to Sarah Anderson. I think she's a genius in the sense that she could have made each one of her comic strips stand alone with a new and different 20-something or early 30-something. But the fact that there's that one character, striped shirt, slightly unkempt hair, that makes you immediately aware that you're reading a Sarah Scribbles. There's that interior branding. There's an approachability and a memorability. Boy, that's a word about it. So I don't know. There's some kind of magic to having one character if you're going to do this kind of approach. It's a little bit like Mother Goose and Grimm, how Grimmy was always in even the ones that weren't about Mother Goose and Grimm, Right.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know. But I take your point, though, that I would essentially be doing Far Side Each one standalone, but in strip format is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. A sequential Far Side.
A sequential Far Side. Yeah. I don't hate that idea. I mean, maybe that's what Sheldon would be if I were starting over again. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something to think about, but both of those angles are pretty solid. Somebody with your skills could make either one of those go. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So I will say this though, if I had to start over again, the first thing that I would do, even though it's increasingly less effective than it used to be, is I would get the comic first thing on 4 or 5 social media platforms. Even before I did the website, because I would know that the website, knowing what I know now, I know that a website takes a couple weeks to get going. I would be working on that in the background, WordPress or God, even hiring somebody with my day job for a couple $100 to put together the website. But a website let's be honest, it takes 3 weeks, 6 weeks to get a website going. I would have my social media, although hold on, that's dumb because then I have nowhere to point people.
I was just gonna point that out. See, I would do it the other way. I'd get that website up and running first, and for the exact same reasons that you were using for not doing it first, are the reasons I want to do it first, because I know I'm going to have a lot of bugs to work out. There's going to be a lot of stuff that needs to get done. I might as well get that up in the real world so I can see what those bugs are and I can stop them while nobody's really looking, other than having it later. And now I've got a bunch of bugs and I'm stressing out about it.
You know what? And here's the wisdom to that too. If Brad Geiger is designing a website either alone or with hired help off to the side nights and weekends, he's also building up his archive for when he launches. Yeah. Because you don't necessarily want to launch with just one and it's ready to go. You want 2 or 3 samples when you start, if not 5 or 6. And you want a couple weeks for when you're sick, when there's a wedding, when you've got to travel, when there, this or that. Eventually, that archive is going to be eaten up by life. And so why not launch and give your future self the favor of having a few in the can, so to speak?
Absolutely. So I'm working on that website first. I really do think that that's going to be a big part moving forward of any success that I'm able to generate. And as I'm getting that website up and going, and as I'm doing those things that you just said with the buffer and the archive, then I'm going to start looking at platforms and social media. Okay. So here's the thing. Social media, I think right now what we are looking at, and I said a little bit about this in a previous show, but it really astounded me that Threads had such a big opening weekend, and then a week later it bottomed out.
It did, didn't it?
It was everything we wanted in a Twitter replacement. And then after a week, we were like, oh, I hate this. Right. And so you think to yourself, well, what was wrong with Threads? I don't think it was Threads. I think it's us. I think we as a group of people, as a society, as a culture, are kind of done with social media. We don't have that same excitement as we used to have with social media. So I think social media is on its way out or on its way to evolving to the next thing, but I don't know what that's going to be yet. So I've got to go out and I've got to start a presence on Twitter. I've got to start a presence on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, all the players, maybe even Mastodon, even though,
listen to this, everybody. Brad, here's your slice of humble pie.
Yeah. Well, yeah, listen, if I listen, I'm posting on Mastodon right now as we speak, because I don't think Mastodon is it, but you got to be out there. Sometimes I'm wrong, so I got to be out there. So no, I'm gonna start up on all of those social media platforms and start putting stuff out. And I'm gonna try and do the 4 C's of social media to try to generate something, because it's more than just posting a comic. Right. I've got to be out and comment. I got to be part of the community. I've got to do all of that stuff that we talk about doing, and then I got to look at the platforms. Now, if I'm doing a romance anime style comic, I'm going to be on Webtoons without a doubt. If I'm not drawing in an anime style, and if I'm not doing romance, I've got no business being on Webtoons. And
that's all I got to do. True.
There's not many popular cartoons or comics on webtoons that breaks that mold. There's not many of them.
But I'm just saying it's not. You had a kind of an absolutism about it that you're not at all welcome. Get out of here, kid. I'm saying you could make it. The look on your face. Yeah. I'm saying you could try. I think
you could try pissing in the wind too, but you're gonna have about as much luck. I'm telling you, it slaps you in the face when you open up webtoons. It says, "Hey, we're all about romance anime here." Smack, smack. Right. That's how you can't be surprised if you're on webtoons and you're not doing that and you're not making traction because it smacks you in the face every time you open it.
So let me ask you this on a different question. So you and I are now, because we've hired a lawyer, we looked at their contracts. You and I are aware of what the webtoons clauses mean when you sign up, and that you could it's forever and unbreakable in terms of having. I don't remember the specific phrase, but anyway, knowing what you know,
perpetuity was the word.
Perpetuity, but also that you can never have complete rights to it. Webtoons would always have, which would completely keep you from selling it off 10 years from now, 15 years from now, for rights and stuff. Anyway, knowing what you know now about webtoons, so you still would launch on webtoons as a new cartoonist, even though you know what you know?
If I had an anime drawn romance, I would have to think long and hard about making a deal with the devil.
Okay.
That was.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm just saying, is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay.
If I had that, I'd have to think long and hard about, do I want to make a deal with the devil and go in with my eyes open? I'm not saying I would. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I'd say it would be on the table. If I had that kind of comic. And by the way, that goes for Tapastic too. If I had the kind of comic that clearly rises to the top there, and they've got it's very clear what's working and what's not. Same thing, because Tapastic has had good days and bad days with their terms of service as well in the past. So I would ask myself, do I do the kind of comic that clearly rises to the top on that platform? And if so, do I want to make a deal with the devil? So far, just knowing what I know now, it would have to be, I'd have to have very, very good chances of success before I would make that deal. I just knowing me, it would have to take a lot to get me to sign that contract. But it's not impossible either.
Yeah. So I will say that, like Brad, I would be hitting every social media service. I would be hitting Reddit. Unlike Brad, I personally don't know that I would do webtoons or Tapastic, but I, as an outsider looking in, I respect Brad's choice in that if he had the right comic to fit on that platform. I can't, and I don't naysay anyone that necessarily jumps on webtoon. I just say do it with eyes open, because some of those clauses are pretty grabby. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. I will say this. So having a day job now, Dave Kellett has a day job again. I will say that I will spend the money, because we haven't talked about this in terms of resources and tools. I will spend the money from my day job savings to get a Wacom, and I wouldn't get the biggest one, and I wouldn't get the smallest one. I would probably get the medium size. There's like the smallest of the pros, because it for me, it has made a difference having this sturdy device. A lot of people like drawing on an iPad. Maybe I would consider that, but I don't know. I need a certain table-like approach to draw on. So I would probably use my savings, and I would probably also get an Adobe Cloud account. because I've never been able to use GIMP or whatever that, the also ran software.
The Affinity suite is very impressive. It looks good. But I bought it when they were putting it out there a couple of years. They had a really good sale on their suite, and I got a couple of licenses. But the fact of the matter is, I just when I open up InDesign, I know exactly how it's going to work, and I know where everything is. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I would probably buy that Adobe Creative Cloud again. And
here's the unhappy part of that we hadn't talked about, but those first 5 to 6 years are really building years. Yes. And I remember from my 20s, and part of my sadness of that first night would be the recognition that I would kind of have to give up video games and just reading for fun and movies and stuff. Because remember, I'm working a day job. I'm coming home. I'm having dinner. I'm working out. And then I'm probably hitting the comics desk. And I'm probably shaving 1 hour of sleep off of my night, if I'm being honest about it, so that I can get these comics out. So over 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, remember, with no income coming in. But I'm taking the money that I would have spent on a PlayStation 4 or 5, and I'm buying a Wacom or I'm buying Adobe Suite. And I will be honest, those years in my 20s, it was a lot of self-sacrifice to get that train moving, basically.
Oh my God. There was an entire 10-year period which I didn't get a single pop culture reference that people used because I didn't watch the TV shows that they were referencing. I didn't watch the movies. I didn't play the video games. Every time somebody made a pop culture reference, it mystified me because, and that's when I finally did quit my day job. One of the first things I did was I started playing all of the TV shows from that era in the background while I was inking, just because I missed so much. I finally watched Deep Space Nine because after hearing people talk about it for so long, I binged the entire series because I finally got what they were talking about, you know? Yeah. So and you just talked about monetization. So let's talk about this too. I'm not starting a Patreon on the first day because I've seen up close, just doing this show, I've seen up close how it takes people, it takes their focus away from where it should be, and also leads to a lot of unnecessary depression and frustration, because now all of a sudden, instead of focusing on doing a good comic and getting good at that thing, now I'm trying to go from having 2 Patreon backers to 3 Patreon backers, so I can go from making $1 a month to $2 a month, and nothing is dumber than that. So I'm gonna not even touch Patreon for the first couple of years until I get to a point that I discussed in a previous show where either I've got a super huge audience that's pretty tuned in, and then I go the support route. If each one of those, if 1% of those gives me $1, then I'll have a few $1,000s a month, right? Super huge, kind of tuned in. You play the percentages, or I've got a real solid niche audience, kind of like Drive. It falls into this category where it's not your biggest audience, but it's definitely your most passionate audience, and they're willing to be involved in this community that you've built on Patreon, and that brings in a certain amount of money for you as well, and then the Kickstarters and so on and so on. So I'm not touching Patreon for the first couple of years because this is a crucial part of my journey. And I need to stay laser focused on the quality of the comic. If I'm making creative decisions based on whether I think it's going to gain me a new Patreon backer, I'm doing it all wrong, and I'm going to hurt myself in the long run. I'm still going to get there. It's just going to take me twice as long to get there. So no, what about you? Are you starting a Patreon right away?
No, I'm absolutely not. And it's probably not until end of year 2, maybe year 3, that I'm even trying a small dipping of the toe into merch. And I'll be honest, maybe not even in year 2 and 3. Yeah. I know, Brad, it's going to take me 4, 5, 6, 7 years to start really getting traction. And I'm kind of going to keep my head down, do social media, do the comic every day, go to work, do the media, do the comic every day, go to work. And honestly, it's that for 4 or 5 years until you get going. One thing we haven't talked about, though, and I remember this from my 20s, is to go from 0 readers to 1 reader is kind of one of the hardest moves you have to do. And so here's what I'm also going to do that we never talk about on the show. I'm going to go out to my entire family. They're not my readers. They're not going to be my readers. They're not my ideal audience for what I'm presenting to the world, but they love me. They'll share it with someone they know who might be one of my readers, right? Yeah. I'm also going to go out to my alumni networks. I'm going to go out to my alumni magazine. I'm going to go out to the whatever forums or things for the schools that I went to, where people are talking and saying, hey, gang, remember me, Dave Kellett? You lived in this dorm? Well, I'm doing a comic strip, that kind of thing. I'm going to go out to whatever social groups I'm going to, whatever church groups I'm going to, and I'm going to let them know that I'm doing a comic, because that kind of word of mouth. And also, because I'm working a day job, I'm going to do what I did in Mattel in 20 years ago, which is within every corporation, within every social group, within every family group, there are people called connectors. And it's a certain type of outgoing extrovert for whom they have 150 to 500 social connections. I am not necessarily a connector. My wife is a connector. My wife can talk to anybody and maintains 1,000 good friendships, and she's very good. She is a connector. So what I would do is, there was a sculptor at Mattel, Denise, and I got along really well with Denise. She was great. Denise was a connector, a social connector, really knew and talked to everybody. And if there was a certain comic that I did that I knew was a topic that Denise would like, hot damn, did I make sure to get it in front of Denise and say, here's the link for it if you know anybody that might like it, that kind of thing. And I wouldn't do it in a skeevy way. I would just sort of say, hey, here's one. I know you love Star Trek. Here's a Star Trek joke, that kind of thing. Holy hell, getting it in front of connectors was a great thing to do in real world, not online, in real world. It made a difference, that kind of thing. Did you have any other suggestions like that kind of thing, Brad?
No, I like your suggestion. I don't remember doing a whole lot of it, because I'm a little bit more or less apt to talk about myself in a personal
agreed. Me too. I don't necessarily like to talk about it.
But it's good advice. Here's my question to you. There's a comic convention coming up in Los Angeles. You going to go or not? To exhibit.
No, because how would I make money?
That's just it. It's a bad decision.
However, year 4, 5, 6, maybe if I have a pamphlet type book that I put together, by that I mean either a flop or no, even then I don't know that I would. But
no,
if I've kickstarted a book that's paid for,
Dave, you could promote at the convention. Don't you understand that you could promote and network at the convention?
Well, here's what I would do. I might try to get on a panel or two, and then I would walk around and introduce myself. If no one knows Dave Kellett, I would walk around and introduce myself, because those social connections, even though we poo-poo conventions a lot, they are important. I met Brad at a convention. I met all the people that I know in cartooning at conventions and get-togethers. I would probably try to join the NCS local meetings. That's 20, 30 cartoonists in my region that I can call on as resources. I might do drink and draws locally just to get to know people, because part of it, like we do now, is keeping my head on a swivel to what's working. I would need to very quickly reestablish as many connections as I could. I would probably try to seek out people like Brett. Like, I don't know, in this situation, do I know you, or do we?
Oh, good question. Let's make it difficult. You don't know me.
I don't. I think I would intuit that I needed to make new connections. I needed to get a network of cartoonists who were like me, starting out, similar age, similar backgrounds, similar skill sets, and saying, let's kind of do this together so that I'm not alone,
Yeah. No, and just to have, like we said at the top of the show, it's been such a joy in my life to have somebody like you that I've been able to reach out to and talk to and commiserate with, and also to share happy moments that would be unshareable unless you knew the backstory, right? Like certain milestones that I've gotten, nobody appreciates them like somebody that's been there. right? It doesn't make any sense to anybody else.
A peer, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, reaching out and building a community and becoming part of a community of like-minded creative people, like-minded cartoonists would be important to me at that point. Because I know from experience, I'm going to need that. I'm going to need somebody who I can say, hey, I'm thinking about doing a Patreon, and somebody who knows enough about it to say, maybe hold off on that for another year, And also, even beyond business decisions, people who can say, yeah, I know this part sucks. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's been very important to have those kind of relationships.
Well, we haven't really talked about it, but the emotional side of that is, even though cartoonists tend to, and I don't want to draw with too broad a brush, but we tend to be a little, not antisocial, but introverted and keep to ourselves-ish. Mm-hmm. However, the emotional side is, you just need to be able to email somebody every once in a while or text somebody and be like, am I on the right path? Am I doing this? Is this the right decision? Should I be doing XYZ? Or just the feedback of peers and near peers talking about what's the right path. Are we doing the right thing? That was important in my first decade. To both course correct me and to encourage me when I was on the right path.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And so we've gone through launching the comic, putting it on social media, avoiding Patreon for the first couple of years, avoiding comic conventions, and then building our professional networks. Is there anything else, as we bring this topic to a close, that we're forgetting? Anything else that's really important for us to put on our list of things to do?
So the other last to do that I would have is I would buy, a 10-year calendar, and I would circle a date 7 years out, 9 years out. Okay. That's when I could quit my day job. And it's going to take me the better part of a decade, I might start earning 30-40% of my income of my day job at the 5-year point, 6-year point, but it's going to take me 7, 8, 9 years, maybe 10 until I can quit my day job. And I think that awareness, that emotional and psychological preparation that it's going to take me the better part of a decade would actually be helpful, unlike the first time around. Yeah.
Well, and that's a tough transition. That's a really tough transition to make, because my big plan, which in retrospect was not a great plan, my plan was, when I make as much at comics as I make at my day job, then I'm going to quit the day job and do comics.
Right.
Sounds great, right? It's very logical.
Right.
The problem that I hadn't thought all the way through, and reality ended up hitting me in the face, was like, okay, that's great, but if you do that, now our income goes from 100% to 50%.
Right.
Because you just threw 50% of your income out the window.
Right.
You've got to really, really have a lot of reasons to believe in that remaining 50% that you can immediately grow it back to 100% in a period of time. So in preparing for that, knowing now what I wish I had known then, it would be very smart for me to build or start building a quit your day job fund, a little bit of money at a time every year, so that I can put it away, because I know when I finally get to that point that I'm going to take my income and chop it in half, I'm going to need a quit your day job fund that's going to be able to weather me through the next 6 to 9 months as I'm building that remaining 50% up to hopefully 75 or even 90%. I'm going to need a quit your day job fund.
Yeah. And I think, I super agree with you. B, I think a way to do that, actually, and if I remember correctly, I think I did this. No, I didn't do this, but I should have done this like Brad, is for a year or two before you quit that day job, just live off your cartooning income if you can. Because what you're also doing by doing that is you're seeing the pain of living just off that 50% of your income. And you're also socking away that other 50 or 40 or 30% that you are getting from your day job. And that's becoming your rainy day fund, because you are not quitting your job without a rainy day fund. You are not doing that. Yeah. You've got 3 months, 6 months, God, ideally a year, although that's a lot of money, of monthly expenditures saved up. And I think I could do that if I had to restart again. It's tricky because it essentially means you're getting rid of any joy-filled expenditures for a year or 2 years. No new couch, no new TV, no new movie trips, no new video games. You know what I mean? But you're doing it for the greater good, which is you're sacrificing now so that future you will have a career in cartooning.
Yep. And the last thing on my list is to ask myself, how much do I love comics?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because for the next several years, that's all I'm going to have. I'm not going to have money. I'm not going to have fame.
Right.
I'm not going to have awards. I'm not going to have any of that stuff. For the next several years, all I'm going to have is the love of what I do. So it's time to look myself in the mirror, eyeball to eyeball, and say, how much do you really love this? Because it's all the appreciation of a job well done, the love of comics, the love of reaching out and connecting to people with a comic. It's all you're going to have for the next 3 years. So this is the time for a gut check and say, how much do you really love this? Because maybe it's best you do something else with your time. That's something that's you've got to address as well. Is this the best use of your time? If you don't really love comics, if you're not absolutely head over heels with the idea of doing writing and putting it out into sequential drawings, if you're not in love with that concept, if you're not unrealistically in love with it, maybe this is a good time to do something else, because for the next few years, all you're going to have is love.
Boy, Brad, that's really insightful. That's absolutely the mindset that you have to go into, and it's where we were. So now let me ask you a question, because as you were talking about that, I realized what I would probably do is if this Thanos Snap happened and I lost my career, but I still had all my skill set, what I might do is take a month to see how hungry I still was to make comics. Does that make sense? Or would I have been satisfied with the 25 years or whatever that I mentally knew I had done already, even though it's been Thanos snapped away?
Yeah.
I think after a month of not doing it, I think the itch would be there. How about with you? Do you think you would want to rebuild?
Yeah, I think taking a little bit of break to gauge my passion is a good idea. Maybe because, honest to goodness, how many people do we know that they reach their own Thanos snap in a way where it's like, this isn't working, this isn't happening, it's not gelling the way I wanted to, right? And then they pivoted into something else, making books. Video game design. I know one person from early webcomics that started doing his own indie game design and did amazing things, or writing music, or, maybe going out and getting a job and putting that creative stuff into baking incredible birthday cakes for your kid and growing an amazing garden or something. You know what I mean? Something that's completely different for a little while until, and maybe it never happens, that absolute cross-eyed desire of making comics comes back. It's not a bad idea to take that moment as maybe this is a good opportunity for me to find out what else there is to do in life.
Well, that's beautifully put, but you a little bit sidestepped the question. If I
you noticed that, did you?
If I Thanos snapped your career away, you had all the skill sets that you have right now. You've taken a month or 2 or 3 months to sort of feel how much the passion is there. Does Brad Geiger start over again in comics?
Yes. Listen, Dave, the fact that I've been on the other side of this microphone talking comics with you for 6 years, and we've got every intent of doing it another 6 or 7 or 10 or 20 more until one of us loses the ability to speak. I'll be doing it again. I don't have any question. I'll post it on social media later today. I found what may have been one of my first cartoons, one of my first comics, as I was cleaning out stuff in the studio. It's a letter to the Tooth Fairy, which with illustrations from a young semi-toothless Brad Geiger. I've always been obsessed, compelled, to do this thing. It's my one thing. It's hard watching my two sons grapple with what am I going to do with the rest of my life. They're at that age, 21 and 17. College age. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? And it's so painful because there's no clear answer. They could do any number of things, but for me, it was always one thing. It was always comics for me. Yeah. It was never being a fireman. It was never being a marine biologist. It was never being a data analyst. It was always comics. Even when I had a tooth under the pillow for the tooth fairy, it was comics. And I'll post it later on today. You're going to love it. But it was always comics. So yeah. I'll be doing comics again. I have no doubt about it. I can take a week off. I can take a month off. But at some point, I'm going to be writing really dumb jokes and really silly stories and putting them into sequential illustrations to get my point across because it's the one thing I do.
Yeah, I think you put it beautifully. That's exactly how I feel is that do I, in a multiverse of lives, like sort of a sliding door thing, could I have been other things in life? Yes. Of course, I have the creative abilities to do a couple different things in life in terms of writing or during certain kind of illustration or this or that. But cartooning for me was always this magical point of godlike storytelling where I could be director, writer, actor, costumer, stager, everything was, I love the art of comics. Yes. And I have bookshelves and bookshelves of bookshelves of comics. I will watch anything about cartoonists or interviews about cartoonists. I love the history of cartoonists. I did 2 stupid master's degrees that gained me nothing in life just because I love comics so much. Yeah. And like you, I find myself doodling when I'm on the phone. I find myself doodling when I'm waiting for a train. I like anything that cartooning infests who I am. Mm-hmm. And I would be sad if I had a Thanos snap, but I think after I would take me a couple of weeks, I would shake it off and I'd go, all right, back into the game I go. Cause I love it. I love comics.
Back to the drawing board, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And, as much as I like comics, I got to say on the 300th show, I've really loved doing ComicLab because, again, it's been an ability to share that love with someone who matches my passion iota for iota. So on the 300th show, let me just say thank you. And here's to 300 more times that I get to say that you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your delightful host has been my friend Brad Geiger, the wonderful editor of webcomics.com and the incredibly talented creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, who knows talent when he sees it.
You rat bastard.
The wonderful co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, the delightful cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and the masterful comic artist of Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media. And Matt, we got to give you a huge shout out and thank you for 300 wonderful episodes. Thank you, our friend, and thank you for hopefully 300 more.
Yes, indeed. And if you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode. And if you're listening on Spotify, take a minute, give us a 5-star review. Keep us right at the top of those Spotify comic podcast charts.
And ComicLab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So I'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/support the things you like. Okay, so the Thanos snap has happened. I have lost my career. I have all of my abilities. What if there is some kind of weird drive in me that's just like, find Brad Geiger,
like you don't know why you got to find Brad Geiger, because in the Thanos Snap we don't know each other.
Yeah.
So it's in the same thing. I'm trying to find Dave Kellett, but I don't know why. I just wake up in the middle of the night, find Dave Kellett, and we're just searching the country trying to find each other. Wouldn't that be great? I've got to find somebody named Dave Kellett. I don't know why, but he's the secret to making this all work.
Apparently, it's all going to work out if I just find this Brad Geiger guy.
And then finally, I show up in Los Angeles, knock on the door, and the door opens, and I say, "Are you Dave Kellett?" And you go, "Yes." And I go, "Well, there's got to be another Dave Kellett in the world." It's a popular name. I wonder
if I'm at the wrong door.